Hey, tonight we slip into sandals far older than any Roman, Greek, or medieval boot into the dust and golden glare of ancient Egypt, where one boy was raised not just to be a king, but a living god. Statues of him still tower over the desert. His name is carved more times than any other in pharaonic history. And here's the kicker, he reigned longer than some entire civilizations. You've probably heard of Ramses the Great, but did you know he was declared Kurula while barely a teenager, or that he might have helped inspire the biblical pharaoh of Exodus? Or more unexpectedly, that his red hair had scientists whispering about potential origins far from the Nile. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. Press the notification bell to update many new videos. Also, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it where you are? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're not born Ramses the Great. You're born Ramses, son of Seti I, a prince of Egypt with scorpions under your pillows and 1,000 expectations hanging around your neck like a heavy ankh. From your very first breath in the palace at Avaris, your fate's already being chiseled in limestone. Seti I is no slouch. He's a general, a temple builder, a king with a serious don't mess with me aura. Every day, you his only surviving son, shadow him through halls that smell of incense and ambition. You watch how he gestures to priests like he's conducting an invisible orchestra. You ride with him through parades where the commoners cheer and the nobles take mental notes, but behind the scenes, things are more complicated. Your tutor is a man named Parenifer, whose job is to stuff your head with hieroglyphs, histories, astronomy, etiquette, and a touch of combat training, just enough to not fall off a chariot and embarrass everyone. You're also drilled in diplomacy. There's no teen phase when you're heir to the throne. While other kids might be chasing scarab beetles or sneaking dates from the palace kitchen, you're learning how to smile without revealing fear, how to answer trick questions from foreign dignitaries, and how to invoke gods in just the right order. Seti doesn't coddle you. He tests you constantly. Once, he sends you to settle a minor dispute between priests at Karnak and quarry workers at River. It seems like a no-brainer. Turns out, the dispute's been festering for 3 years, and if you favor one side too much, you risk offending Amon's temple treasury, which basically runs the economy. Good luck, kid. You'll learn fast. You learn to nod solemnly even when you're panicking. You learn when to speak, and when silence is the smartest answer in the room. But the pressure, it's enormous. One scroll from the time refers to the noble youth Ramesses, fierce in heart, lion of sunrise. That's either incredibly flattering or a clever way of saying this boy better not screw it up. The court has seen other royal children. Most didn't live long enough to make it out of their 20s. Some vanished into the records altogether. Still, you grotler, broader, sharper, by 12. You're commanding ceremonial processions. By 13, you've attended military briefings. And then, at 14, it happens. Seti calls a grand court assembly. Nobles, priests, generals, scribes. The room is so thick with incense, it looks like a golden fog has descended. And in front of everyone, he announces, "My son shall not wait. To rule, he shall rule with me." Boom. Co-regency.q. The gasps, the sighs, the muttered prayers, to Thoth. You're a teenager. And now, you're not just next in line, you're sitting beside your father on the double throne, wearing the red and white crowns of Upper and Lower Egypt. Historians still argue whether this move was a stroke of genius or a reckless gamble. Some say Seti was securing continuity. Others believe he saw something in Usum's spark he feared might be snuffed out if not protected by authority. And of course, there are those who mutter, even now, that Seti was just tired of paperwork and wanted a few more quiet afternoons with his pet baboons. Regardless of motives, you're in the game now. As Corregent, your name is etched into decrees. You start receiving royal tribute. You sit in court and listen to petitions from farmers, governors, even foreign emissaries. Occasionally, you glance over at your father for approval. Often, he just closes his eyes, lets you squirm, and waits to see if you'll rise or flounder. You rise slowly, but you do, and through it all, you never forget the weight of that moment. How a boy, barely old enough to shave, was handed the keys to an empire stretching from the Delta to Nubia. The gods are watching. So are your enemies. And perhaps, somewhere deep inside, so are your future statues. You've barely settled into the Corregent's seat when Egypt starts humming louder. The rhythms of court shift. You're not just practicing rule anymore. You are ruling, albeit in Seti's long, intimidating shadow. But your name appears beside his on decrees. Scribes scratch your likeness next to his in temple reliefs. And when you speak in court, people actually listen now well. Most of them Seti still steers the ship, but he lets you take the rudder now and then, and just like any father testing a future pharaoh, he watches closely, doesn't say much, but you can feel the weight of his gaze even when his eyes are on a map. It's around this time you start noticing who's really loyal and who just plays the part. Court is full of smiling snakes, ambitious generals, priests with more land than some nobles, whisperers from foreign lands who offer honeyed words and expect favors in return. But the real moment of shift that comes when Seti takes you north to the frontier. You're still a teenager, but suddenly you're riding with chariots, inspecting garrisons, sleeping in military tents that smell like leather, sweat, and roasted goat. Seti wants you to understand the limits of power, not just the glory of it. So, he marches you through dusty border towns, shows you what happens when taxes aren't collected, or when a Nubian raid slips through the cracks. Then one night, you're sitting by the campfire with a handful of veterans, and a scar-faced commander named Menmot leans toward you and says, "A real pharaoh earns his crown in the dust, not in the temple." Then he tosses a bone into the fire like he just solved the meaning of life. You don't forget that, not ever. A year passes, then another. Seti grows slower. His voice, once thunderous, becomes more deliberate. There's a rumor, just a whisper, that he's grooming you for full rule because something's off. He's seen too many battles. Or perhaps he's simply seen too much. And then, before your 20th birthday, the inevitable happens. Seti I dies. The court plunges into mourning, at least publicly, privately. The wheels turn. Alliances shift. You sit on the throne fully alone for the first time, and the silence is deafening. The crown weighs heavier without his hand guiding yours beneath the table. But you don't fall, you rise. You order Seti's tomb, completed a grand affair, hidden deep within the Valley of the Kings. You personally oversee the final rituals. His mummy, wrapped in linen, soaked in oils, is placed beneath golden falcons and alabaster jars. The priests chant. The air crackles with incense and grief. And then, as his sarcophagus slides into place, you whisper a prayer not just for him, but that you'll be worthy of what comes next. You're now Ramses II, pharaoh of Egypt, the living Horus, chosen of Ra, lord of two lands, bearer of approximately 38 other titles, most of which you're still memorizing. And here's where it gets real, because within your first years as pharaoh, you're tested hard. There are border skirmishes with Libyan tribes, grain shortages in Lower Egypt, high priests angling for more influence, and worst of all, the the mighty Hittite Empire. If Egypt is a lion, they're the bear across the river. And both of you want control of the lucrative trade routes through QAnon and Syria. That's where the money flows, and where soldiers bleed. But before we get to the roaring clash at Kadesh, there's a peculiar little moment that most history books skip. You commission a statue of yourself, not just any statue, a colossal one. It's to be placed at the Temple of Luxor, and it's bigger than any statue of Seti now. Historians still argue whether this was a heartfelt tribute to your father's legacy, or an early move to cast your own shadow across the land. Maybe both. Ancient politics were nothing if not layered. But this statue, it's massive, towering. You make the nose just slightly more pronounced because, well, that's kind of your thing, red-haired, strong-jawed Ramses. The people are going to remember this face, whether they want to or not. You also marry. Well, you start marrying. First comes Nefertari, brilliant and graceful, whose eyes seem to catch things others miss. She's not just your queen, she's your equal, your confidant. You'll build her a tomb so beautiful that it makes visiting archaeologists cry centuries later, but for now, she's your first true anchor. And alongside her, other wives, secondary queens, political alliances. It's Egypt, after all dynasties, must grow. But marriage doesn't slow you. It motivates you. You want more than just to sit on a throne. You want to be remembered forever. So you begin quietly planning your legacy, not just in stone, but in action. You reform certain laws. You order new irrigation projects to win the hearts of farmers. You fund local temples so priests sing your name in their daily prayers. You even open diplomatic channels with Byblos and Cyprus, sending emissaries bearing perfumes, papyri, and gold leaf sandals. You're planting seeds, literal and symbolic. Some bloom in your lifetime. Others won't bloom for millennia. When archaeologists dust off hieroglyphs and whisper, this Ramses guy really went for it. And so, barely out of your 20s, you're no longer just a boy who shadowed a king. You're the king now, and Egypt, it's watching. You wake to the snort of horses and the clang of bronze. This is no palace morning. You're not lounging beneath linen canopies or listening to harpists strum your praises. You're in a military camp, the air thick with dust, sweat, and anticipation. And before you looms the most infamous gamble of your reign, the Battle of Kadesh. Let's set the stage. The year is somewhere around 1274 BC. Give or take a papyrus smudge. You've been pharaoh for a few years now, and the Hittite Empire, led by the sly King Muwatalli, has been pushing into Canaan like an annoying neighbor expanding their backyard fence. Egypt can't ignore it. You won't ignore it, so you gather your forces, thousands of infantry, hundreds of war chariots, and enough supplies to make your scribes weep. You divide your army into 4 divisions: Ammon, Ra, Ptah, and Set. Very on brand. You, naturally, lead the Ammon division personally. Because who's going to tell Ramses the Great to sit in the tent? As you move north toward Kadesh, every mile feels like a prayer flung into the wind. The terrain shifts. Heat becomes stifling. Flies appear in squadrons. And your scouts, let's just say their Yelp reviews are not going to be kind. Because when you reach the Orontes River near Kadesh, you walk into a trap to captured Hittite spies under suspiciously cooperative circumstances. Confess that Muwatalli is far to the north. You believe them. Who wouldn't? They're tied up, terrified, sweating buckets, classic innocent faces. You march your army forward. Big mistake. Muwatalli is not up north. He's hiding just beyond the city with 40,000 troops. Oops, the Hittite chariots descend like a sandstorm. Your Ra division, caught by surprise, gets absolutely wrecked. Panic erupts. Dust blinds the field. Men scatter. Your own division is suddenly exposed, surrounded, and Ramses find yourself in the most humiliating position a pharaoh can face, almost dead in the dirt. But here's where the story takes a turn. A very Ramses turn. Instead of retreating, you rally. You grab your reins, shout to the heavens, and charge straight into the chaos. Your personal guard follows, shields up, spears out, probably wondering if they're about to become very famous or very dead. You ride like a storm through the Hittite line, pushing them back long enough for the Ptah division to arrive and stabilize the battlefield. Later, you'll describe the moment like this: I stood alone, none were with me. I was surrounded by 2,500 chariots. I became like Montu, god of war, and scattered them. That's one version. Historians still argue whether you really pulled off a solo cavalry miracle, or whether your scribes had a flair for dramatic license. Either way, you survive, and more importantly, you spin the story into a masterpiece, because you don't win the Battle of Kadeshnat in the traditional sense. The outcome is a draw. Both sides suffer heavy losses. You eventually agree to a truce and pull back. Muwatalli holds Kadesh, but Egypt never hears it that way. Back home, you commission temple walls covered in scenes of your glorious chariot charge. Multiple temples, actually. You have the Battle of Kadesh engraved not once, not twice, but at least 8 times in different locations. It's the ancient equivalent of reposting your highlight reel on every platform. And the artwork, oh, it's something. You're drawn larger than life, pulling a bow with arms like marble columns, trampling Hittite soldiers under divine horses, while Ammon himself hands you victory like it was all planned from the start. Was it propaganda? Sure. Was it brilliant? Absolutely dot. Because while Muwatalli brags in Hittite clay tablets, you immortalize your victory in stone. And guess which one lasts longer in the public imagination? Exactly, but let's not skip the fringe detail. Because deep in the Hittite accounts, not the Egyptian ones, there's a strange little mention that during the battle, an elite Egyptian unit vanished into the woods and never reappeared. Some modern scholars speculate it might have been a defection. Others think it was a scouting party that got lost. One fringe theory even suggests they were wiped out by local Canaanite tribes performing religious rites, because, nothing says Tuesday afternoon like human sacrifice and missing soldiers. Whatever the truth, the Battle of Kadesh teaches you something profound. Power isn't just about winning. It's about controlling the story. And no one controls a story like Ramses II. You return to Egypt a hero. You parade through Thebes with your army behind you, chariot wheels gleaming, priests tossing lotus petals like divine confetti. Nefertari greets you at the gates. Trumpets blare, children cheer, And you smile like a man who's just learned the secret of empire building. Perception is power. The dust of Kadesh hasn't even settled when you decide that victory carved in sandstone will last longer than blood spilled on foreign soil. If you're going to be remembered not for years, but for millennia, you need something bigger than war. You need monuments. And so begins your second great campaign, not against the Hittites, but against time itself. Your architects, engineers, and artists are summoned, dozens of them, hundreds. They arrive with rolled papyri, clay models, bronze tools, and the kind of stress wrinkles that come from knowing their pharaoh will personally inspect every detail. You don't just want a temple, you want a message. You want the gods to blush. With envy. Your first move, expand Luxor and Karnak. They're already impressive, sure, but impressive isn't enough. You enlarge the hyperstyle hall at Karnak with columns so massive, a dozen. Men could link hands around one and still not touch fingers. You walk through it at dusk, the shafts of amber sunlight slanting through its forest of stone, and for a moment, even you feel small. Then you remember it's your name carved on every column. Much better, but temples aren't enough. You want entire cities to echo your glory. In the Nile Delta, you order the construction of Ramses, the House of Ramses, soon known to history as Ramses. It's not just a capital, it's a statement. Here, grand boulevards line the avenues. Colossal statues of you rise on either side like gatekeepers of time. The palace walls are inlaid with faience and gold. There are lion-headed fountains, sacred, pools, military barracks, scribal schools, and even zoological gardens. Yes, you have pet lions. Don't act surprised. Foreign ambassadors step foot into Ramses and practically trip over their jaws. You've built not just a seat of power, but a megaphone for your legend. Every road, every altar, every slab of polished granite seems to whisper, "This is Ramses, kneel and oh." The statues. You commission hundreds, each taller, wider, and more muscular than the last. No pharaoh has ever immortalized himself so extensively. You're not subtle about it either. If a temple originally honored Amun or Ptah or Ra, you add your own image standing beside them, equal, sometimes even taller. Some later kings would quietly erase their predecessors' names from temple walls and insert their own. You dare the future to try, still. Let's not pretend all this grandeur comes without cost. Quarrying stone from Aswan is brutal work. Workers haul blocks weighing 60 tons across desert tracks, greased with castor oil and prayers. Some die. Others vanish. At the back of every project is Deir el Medina, the secret village of artisan families who chisel and paint your legacy in shifts, sometimes day and night. Modern scholars still debate whether these workers were privileged craftspeople, with steady wages and days off, or if the cheerful official records gloss over a more exploitative truth. Maybe a little of both. We do know they left graffiti tiny doodles and sarcastic notes tucked into cracks and tomb walls. One simply reads, "The foreman made us do it again. May he stub his toe." But what you're really after isn't just size, it's immortality. You understand something few rulers ever grasp, that stone lasts, but only if it's seen. So you place your temples along trade routes, river bends, pilgrimage paths. You create a network of visibility. Travelers will stumble upon your likeness whether they're praying, bartering, or just looking for a place to pee. And within each temple, stories. Your scribes don't just carve your titles. They tell your tale of heroism at Kadesh with some generous edits. Your divine birth Ra himself involved. Naturally, your dialogues with gods who conveniently agree with everything you say. One particular scene. It shows you nursing at the breast of a goddess. Historians still argue whether this was metaphorical, ceremonial, or just really awkward art direction. Either way, the message is clear. Ramses doesn't serve the gods. Ramses is among them. But for all your divine swagger, you're not above details. You personally inspect architectural plans. You correct stonemasons. You tell artists, no, the beard needs to be longer, and they nod, bow, and rush to fix it. Once, you even order an entire pylon rebuilt because its proportions annoyed you. When you're Ramses, the walls don't talk back, and then there's your favorite architectural move, duplication. If one statue is powerful, two are overwhelming. Abu Simbel, 4 of you, seated, eternal, staring across the Nile as if waiting for the sun to rise and kiss your forehead. It works, the people believe. The foreigners marvel. The priests mutter respectful prayers with just a hint of fear. Your enemies see this empire of granite and gold and wonder if you've cracked the code to eternity. And maybe you have. By now, your name is carved into every third block of limestone in Egypt. Your chariots glint under the desert sun. Your beard is almost as famous as your crown. But amidst the storm of war, stone, and statecraft, there's a quiet Astoria, thread braided into your rule like gold into linen. Her name is Nefertari. You didn't just marry her for politics. Although aligning yourself with a noble family from Thebes certainly helped keep southern Egypt loyal, no, Nefertari was something else entirely. Elegant, whip-smart, with a smile that could shame Hathor herself. She wasn't content to stand beside you. She walked with you head high, veil trailing like a banner in the wind. She wasn't your only wife, of course not. This is ancient Egypt, where pharaohs marry like they're collecting temple figurines. But Nefertari, she was the chief queen, the great wife of the king. And you made sure everyone knew it. When you return from campaigns or temple inspections, she meets you not as a woman awaiting her husband, but as a partner awaiting her equal. You consult her on matters of religion, diplomacy, even war. Foreign scribes mention her by name, which is rare like ancient celebrity status. And if whispers from the palace walls are to be believed, she often outmaneuvered your advisors with a single raised eyebrow and a well-timed question. But the real love letter, it comes in stone. You commission a tomb for her in the Valley of the Queens. Not just any tomb, the most exquisite ever carved. The walls are covered in radiant color, showing Nefertari not just as your wife, but as a divine traveler, walking hand in hand with Isis and Hathor. She's painted in vibrant reds and ochres, her figure tall and graceful, eyes lined in kohl, lips parted in perpetual prayer. One inscription still sends shivers down the spines of modern visitors, for whom the sun shines. That's what you called her. That's how you saw her. And the tomb, it's no dark, silent cavern. It's a living story, one of love, reverence, and spiritual passage. Scholars still argue whether its artistic quality was the work of a master, guild, or a royal decree that spared no expense. Either way, it stuns. But Nefertari isn't just a passive figure in your tale. She's your secret weapon in diplomacy. When you make peace with the Hittites finally, you don't just seal the treaty with a handshake and a scroll. You also marry a Hittite princess. 2, in fact. But again, Nefertari remains queen, and when letters pass between royal courts, she writes to foreign queens directly. She signs her name in hieroglyphs that glimmer with authority. There's one letter from a Hittite queen that refers to Nefertari as sister, a term reserved for equals. You better believe that raised a few plucked eyebrows in the scribes. Hall, you build her statues nearly as tall as yours. You fund her temple at Abu Simbel, right beside yours. Equal in architecture, equal in elevation. In one relief, she stands with sword raised, smiting enemies like a goddess of war. It's bold, it's political, it's personal. Of course, not every advisor loves this. There are whispers that you're too enchanted, too indulgent, that the queen has your ear when generals should, that your heart is a chink in your armor. You ignore them, because when she walks into the throne room, even the gods pay attention. Still, life in the palace isn't all harp music and lotus wine. The royal household is a hydra. Dozens of wives, concubines, children, so many children that your scribes eventually just lose count. You name a few sons, Ramses, just to mess with historians. Seriously, there are over 20 Prince Ramses. Managing this royal web is a game of divine chess. Concubines jockey for influence. Sons eye each other with suspicion. Daughters are married off to strategic provinces like golden tokens. And through it all, Nefertari maintains her grace, navigating the halls like a hawk in silk. But time, as always, has other plans. You're in your third decade as pharaoh when she begins to fade. Slowly, subtly, no dramatic collapse, just more time resting indoors, fewer appearances at festivals, more incense burned not for celebration but for healing. One morning, the palace is too quiet, the servants bow too deeply, the courtiers look away, and you know, the funeral rites are unlike any other. You walk behind the procession, your jaw clenched, your heart a stone you can't chisel. She is carried in gold and cedar, wrapped in linen, soaked in sacred oils. Her face covered with a mask that doesn't quite capture her smile. At the mouth of her tomb, you stop. The priests chant, the sistrums ring, and you whisper the same name. You once wrote into the cliffs, Nefertari, for whom the sun shines. You don't cry, but later, alone, you write one last decree, that her tomb be sealed with a spell older than King's one, promising rebirth, reunion, and a place beside you forever, because even gods get lonely. There's a shift after Nefertar. It isn't loud or sudden. It's like the Nile changing course, just a little subtle, but irreversible. You still reign, still wear the crowns, still ride at festivals, flanked by priests and princes. But something's different now, something heavier. So what do? You lean harder into the divine. You make yourself not just pharaoh, but God on earth. If the people must mourn your queen, then you give them a king who never falters, and so begins your boldest campaign yet, merging man with myth. You double down on temple building. Yes, but now your imagery is more divine. Not just Ramses, the warrior, now it's Ramses, beloved of our men. Ramses, the son of Ra. Ramses, who speaks and the Nile floods in joy. A modest guy, clearly your temple at Abu Simbel. It's carved directly into a mountain. 4-seated colosseage, nearly 70 feet tall, stare eternally east, facing the rising sun. Twice a year, that very sun pierces the sanctuary deep inside and touches your statue's face. Historians still argue whether this solar alignment was intentional or an architectural fluke that worked out way too perfectly. Either way, you don't Correct them. The message is clear. Ramses doesn't worship the gods. He sits with them. In some reliefs, you're depicted making offerings to yourself. No joke. One wall shows Ramses offering incense to Ramses. A modern viewer might call this narcissism. You call it branding. But the lines start to blur in stranger ways too. You begin appearing in temple art, not just among gods, but in place. Of gods, Horus, Osiris, rather, there, but often in supporting roles. You, meanwhile, take center stage. In some inscriptions, your divine name is listed before the gods. Subtle, not so much. Effective, oh yes, the people believe. Or if they don't, they still bow. Because when the pharaoh is a god, questioning him starts to sound like heresy. And heresy doesn't go well in a place where the temples have their own armies. Even the priesthood gets a little nervous, especially the Amun cult at Karnak. Guys are rich, influential, and very used to being the center of attention. They start to worry that if you keep elevating yourself, there might not be much room for anyone else at the top. So you throw them a bone. You fund new shrines. You restore old sanctuaries in their name. You let the high priests wear a little more gold, chant a little louder. But make no mistake, this stage belongs to you. Of course, you still perform your sacred duties. You lead the Opet festival down the Nile. You pour libations during the said festival, that strange royal rejuvenation ritual, where you literally reenact your own rebirth every 30 years. You dress in leopard skins, run ceremonial laps, and receive the breath of life from statues carved in your own image. It's like hosting your own birthday party, except the cake is made of limestone and the guests are holding censers. And then, there's the fringe stuff. Whispers emerge that you might not just be playing at divinity, that maybe you actually believe it. One account claims you insisted on eating only food blessed by the temple oracles. Another says you had a secret chamber in Pyramises filled with talismans, scrolls, and a talking ibis that could predict dreams. Okay, maybe that last one was more poetic metaphor than actual talking bird. But hey, Egypt loved its drama. Still, some things are harder to explain away, like the cult that begins to worship you while you're still alive. Yes, an actual cult. Priests dedicated solely to Ramses. Shrines where statues of you are offered fruit, wine, and prayers. Your name is invoked in healing spells, fertility charms, even weather invocations. You're no longer just a ruler, you're a living conduit between mortals and eternity. This isn't entirely new. Akhenaten tried something similar before you, though he went a bit off the rails and deleted all the gods except one. That went badly. You, on the other hand, don't replace the gods. You join them and the public eats it up. You're their divine protector, their cosmic father figure, the one whose stare alone could part a sandstorm. Farmers invoke your name when the crops need blessing. Soldiers carry amulets with your cartouche. Even criminals sentenced to death mutter your name as a last-ditch plea for mercy. But there's something else, something quieter, something that creeps in during temple vigils or nighttime ceremonies. Mortality, because even gods age, and as you kneel before your own golden statue during the festival of renewal, you can feel the ache in your knees, the stiffness in your joints, the way your breath comes a little shorter on long processions. You're not just playing the role of a god anymore. You're trying to outrun time, and deep down, even in your divine heart, you know time always catches up. You're Ramses the Great, The Nile bends at your will. Temples bloom like lotus flowers wherever you point, and your face is etched into stone from Thebes to the furthest village outpost. But even a god-king has borders. To the south lies Nubia rich, in gold, ebony, ivory, and pride. And unlike your northern foes, the Nubians don't speak in treaties or temple offerings. No, they send warnings in the form of skirmishes, raids, and the occasional stolen shipment of grain. You don't send messengers, you send armies. The campaign to Nubia begins with blistering heat and creaking wheels. Your chariots thunder down. Dusty roads, dust cloaks the horses, and your generals murmur maps to one another like incantations. As you cross into enemy land, the terrain shifts, shrockier, redder, dotted with shrines to local gods who seem to glare at your presence. Your scouts report villages bristling with warriors, bows glinting in the sun, ox-eyed shields drawn close. This isn't an unruly tribe, it's organized resistance. They've heard of you, of course, everyone has, but they haven't felt Ramses the Great up close. That's about to change. You move fast. Swift strikes to shock and awe. You don't just fight, you perform. You ride at the front, your bow drawn, your kilt flaring like a banner. You don't just order victory, you embody it. To your troops, it's exhilarating. To your enemies, it's terrifying. Villages fall, fortresses crumble, rebellions are crushed like lotus stems under sandals. But conquest is only part of the plan. You don't want to destroy Nubia, you want to absorb it. So, after the blood dries and the temples stop burning, you do something unexpected. You build monuments, not just in Egypt, but in Nubia itself. You commission temples at Beit el-Wali, Gurf Hussein, and of course, Abu Simbel, towering cathedral to your glory carved into the cliffs as if nature herself had always meant for you to sit there. One of these temples even shows you Ramses smiting Nubian chiefs beneath your sandal. Graphic, maybe, effective. Oh yes, but not all statues depict violence. In one relief, you're shown offering to local deities on olive branch sculpted in stone. Historians still argue whether this was genuine religious diplomacy or just an expertly disguised PR move. You also import Nubian children into Egypt not as slaves, but as future scribes, soldiers, and bureaucrats. You raise them in your court, educate them, dress them in linen, feed them pomegranates and poetry. One day, they'll return to their homeland, not as rebels, but as administrators, loyal to you. Clever, right? Your empire stretches further south than ever before, and it doesn't just bleed gold, it whispers your name. Ramses, the pharaoh who didn't just conquer, he colonized with ceremony. And let's not forget the most fringe detail. Some modern scholars believe a few of these Nubian settlements, especially around the Third Cataract, began to worship you in local dialects. Ramses the Great, not just son of Ra, but son of the sun itself. But of course, it's not all statues and song. The heat down here is brutal, worse than the Delta. You start wearing lighter linens, drinking sacred water laced with cooling herbs, and bathing twice daily. One priest even suggests crocodile dung as a cooling salve. You pass, your troops suffer too. They miss home, some fall ill, others desert. You replace them with loyal Nubian soldiers, trained in your image, strong, sharp, and absolutely draped in your iconography. Even the handles of their spears bear your Cartouche. By the time you return north, the Nile glitters a little brighter. The merchants smile a little wider. Egypt is safer, richer, louder, but more importantly, it's bigger. You've done what few. Before you dared, you expanded the southern frontier without fracturing the empire. You didn't just defeat the Nubians. You brought them into the fold, one statue at a time. And so, as you step back into the throne room at Ramses, the air still thick with incense and gossip, you realize something strange. You've become inescapable to your people, to your enemies, to the lands beyond Egypt's edge. You are no longer a man ruling a kingdom. You are the kingdom. You've fought wars, built cities, worn divinity like a tailored cloak. But now you do something few rulers manage in a lifetime. You turn your enemies into allies. Let's talk about the Hittites. Remember them, the chariot-charging northern rivals who nearly skewered you at Kadesh. Yeah, those guys. Years have passed since that dust storm of a battle, and neither side really came out swinging the victory torch. Egypt kept its core lands. The Hittites held on to Kadesh. There's a cold stalemate stretched across the Near East like a drawn bowstring, and it's been tense. Then dash famine. A long dry season grips the Hittite lands. Crops fail, markets dry. Food becomes scarcer than honest tax collectors. Meanwhile, Egypt is doing all right, thanks to a relatively kind Nile and those irrigation canals you had dug like veins across the land. And here comes a surprising twist. The Hittite king Hattusili III, not your old frenemy Muwatallis, wallows his pride and sends a message. It's a request for grain. You could say no. You should say no, according to half your advisors. But you don't. You send ships loaded with wheat up the coast. Hattusili breathes easier. The people eat, and something shifts. Mutual interest, mutual survival, mutual realization that fighting another 20-year war over the same patch of sand and cedar might be bad economics. So you start talking. Well, your diplomats do, very politely, with lots of oaths and divine invocations and extremely long-winded greetings. The result: the Treaty of Kadesh, world's first recorded international peace treaty. We're talking a document so detailed it gets carved twice, once in Egypt, in hieroglyphs, and once in Hattusa, in cuneiform. And both versions make it clear Ramses and Hattusili are done with the drama. They'll defend each other from enemies, not be enemies. The actual wording is fascinating. One line reads, "If an enemy of the land of Hatti comes, then Ramses shall send troops." Another flips it, "If an enemy of Egypt arises, Hattusili shall aid." Basically, you got my back, bro. And the most curious line of all, a clause stating neither king will deport refugees fleeing the other. A little ancient refugee policy tucked right into a stone slab. Unexpected, kind of brilliant. Historians still debate whether the treaty was a true partnership or just political theater too. Exhausted empires pretending to smile while keeping spears behind their backs. But one thing's clear. It worked, but you're not done. You take diplomacy a step further and make it personal. You marry a Hittite princess. It's bold. It's almost scandalous. Egyptian pharaohs don't typically wed foreign royals. It implies equality, and you've built a career on being more than other kings. But here you are, meeting the princess at Ramses, welcoming her with full ceremony. She arrives in a gilded litter, veiled and perfumed, flanked by servants bearing gifts, fine horses, lapis jewelry, carved silver drinking vessels. She's renamed Mother Nefer, meaning one who sees Horus flourish, subtle, regal, a name that sings of both nations now bound by treaty and by marriage. You throw a feast that echoes from the palace halls to the back alleys. Dancers spin like flower petals, and musicians pluck rhythms that sound like the Nile laughing. Your people stare, wide-eyed. Your court murmurs. The priests try not to look nervous, but it's a statement to the world. Ramses doesn't just conquer, Ramses unites. You eventually marry a second Hittite princess, too, because why stop at one olive branch when you can plant a whole grove? It's not just diplomacy, it's strategy. These marriages cement peace, open trade, and more practically, prevent more border skirmishes that mess up harvest season. The benefits flow both ways. The Hittites get grain, stability, and Ramses' golden seal of approval. You get metals, horses, and access to Anatolian trade. Merchants prosper. Scribes keep busy. The gods nod in approval, or at least they don't smite anyone. A good sign. And here's the fringe detail that always catches people off guard. A replica of the Treaty of Kadesh hangs in the United Nations headquarters in New York today. Yep, right there. Alongside modern declarations. Proof that your diplomacy outlived your mummies and monuments. Back in Egypt, your people begin to call this era something new. Not just a reign, not just a golden age, an empire of peace. Your enemies have become friends. Your borders are safer. And now that swords are sheathed, you can get back to your real obsession. Stone. Peace tastes sweet, but it also gives you time, and pharaohs with time tend to build things. So now, Ramses, you set your sights on something vast, something living, a city, not just any city, your city in the flat marshy sprawl of the eastern Nile Delta, where frogs croak through reeds and traders roll their eyes at the mud. You command the impossible, raise a gleaming metropolis from the swamp. Brick by brick, beam by beam, you summon Ramses into being. Its full name, Ramses II, the House of Ramses, great in victory. Modest, right? Ramses becomes your masterpiece in motion. The very ground is reshaped, drained, elevated. Crews of laborist ends of thousands stronghold timber, stone, and copper fittings into place under the watchful eyes of overseers. The smell of wet earth, sweat, and new plaster fills the air. Within a few years, the city hums like a hive. Broad avenues paved with crushed white limestone glitter under the sun. Colossal sphinxes line the main road like a parade of silent guards. Palaces rise with windows of imported cedar. Gardens bloom with sycamore, myrrh, and papyrus. And at the heart of it all, the great palace, your seat of power, throne room, and stage 4 unforgettable diplomacy. But Ramses isn't just about show. It's a machine designed to run an empire. You construct military barracks that could house entire legions, chariot. Factories churn out sleek war vehicles like early assembly lines. There are armories stocked with bronze-tipped arrows, and harbors where foreign ships docked with cargoes of tin, incense, lapis, and nervous-looking emissaries. And the temples, oh, the temples, dedicated to Amun-Ra, Patand, of course, they thrum with offerings and hymns, the scent of incense rising skyward in lazy plumes. Priests chant your divine names alongside the old gods. People gather in their courtyards, not just for worship, but for festivals, judgments, and that gossip network. Ramses becomes the new capital of Egypt, placing Thebes in function, if not in sacred law. And it reflects your sensibilities. Bold, bustling, and very pro-Ramses. It's also strategically genius, situated near Egypt's northeastern frontier. It allows you to respond swiftly to trouble from QAnon, the Hittites, or any other neighbor who forgets who's boss. It sits near the Pelusiac branch of the Nile, which means goods can flow directly from the Mediterranean inland, and it gives you direct access to the Levantian trade routes. Merchants from Babylon, Cyprus, and even Mycenae come here. You walk through the marketplace and hear 4 languages in the span of a single breath. Papyrus contracts fly off the scribes' desks like locusts in spring, and buried somewhere between the sandal stalls and spice pavilions, a steady stream of spies yours and theirs. Yes, Ramses, you've built not just a city, but an engine of empire. And yet, Ramses holds more than war rooms and storerooms. It holds your children, dozens of them, maybe over 100, depending on which scribe you ask and how reliable their counting skills were. The royal compound is practically its own city, filled with tutors, nurses, scribes, and weary-eyed concubines. Your sons are trained in chariotry and command. Your daughters learn ritual dance, language, and diplomacy. And at the center of it all, like the eye of a very fertile hurricane, here's a fun fringe tidbit. One inscription from your reign mentions over 90 sons. Yes, 90. Enough to start your own mid-sized country, or the world's most chaotic family dinner. It's no surprise that your court becomes a labyrinth of politics. Children jockey for position. Mothers whisper into ears. Courtiers align with this son or that. You try to stay above it, but let's be honest, how can you not play favorites? Still, you maintain order with iron clarity. You name crown princes in succession, first Amenhotep, then others as the older ones pass or fall from favor. You make them work. One leads troops, another oversees construction. They're not just heirs, they're employees. But while Ramses flourishes, the older cities start to feel ... neglected. Thebes whispers of abandonment. Memphis grumbles about fading prestige. The priests there aren't thrilled that most of the national budget now goes to your personal monument machine. And to be fair, they're not wrong. Historians still argue whether moving the capital was a stroke of statecraft or just your ego trying to find more space to stretch. But one thing's certain, Ramses becomes the beating heart of your reign. It sings your name in bronze and brick. And for a time, just a little while, it feels eternal. You walk its avenues at sunset, your sandals whispering against white stone. Children laugh in the distance. Priests chant somewhere nearby. And a breeze rolls off the Nile, warm and familiar. You look up at a statue of yourself, 10 times your size, smiling that eternal, carved smile. And you wonder, will they remember this city? Will they remember you? Spoiler alert, Ramesses, oh yes. It's one thing to build cities, it's another to build stories, and Ramses. You've always understood the power of a story, especially when it's carved 6 feet deep in stone and can't be edited later. But what about the ones that aren't? Told in temple walls, or sung by priests? What about the whispered stories, the ones tucked behind pylons, brushed into murals, scrawled onto the backs of statues? Welcome to Deir el-Medina, tucked between the cliffs just west of Thebes. Deir el-Medina isn't a city for the gods or the generals. It's for the workers, the artisans, painters, stonemasons, and scribes who create the royal tombs. The real architects of eternity. And you, being Ramses, take good care of them. After all, These are the hands chiseling your legacy. The village is tidy, organized, almost cozy one. Long street lined with mud brick homes. Inside, families cook lentils and barley, sip beer thick enough to spoon, and debate whether they're neighbors. Wall painting is divine or just slightly off-center. These aren't peasants. They're skilled laborers, trained, trusted, often literate, and fiercely proud of their work. Their job: to carve and paint the Valley of the Kings, including, eventually, your own tomb. Each morning they march into the desert in crews. One team does stonework, another paints stars across ceilings, others carefully outline scenes of Osiris judging, hearts of sacred cows in celestial barges, of you naturally striding across eternity, flawlessly youthful and divinely bearded. It's all meticulously planned, all incredibly secret. Tomb locations are guarded like modern nuclear codes. Workers who speak too freely might find themselves reassigned to quarry duty, which is the ancient Egyptian version of fired and sunburnt. But here's the quirky part. Despite the secrecy and ritual, Deir el-Medina is human, intimately, vividly human. We know this because of their graffiti. Yes, even in the ancient world, workers doodled when bored. On unfinished tomb walls, you'll find cheeky sketches, pharaohs with exaggerated noses, gods wearing questionable hats, even an ostrich dancing with a lute. These are your legacy makers, and they've got a sense of humor. One worker, Peshedu, wrote a prayer to be buried in the place of truth, hoping that someday someone would find his bones and remember him as more than a chisel. Someone did. Modern archaeologists uncovered his tomb nearly intact. Another left a love letter scratched on a pot. My heart is with you, like the sails are with the wind. That's not bad poetry for a man who also carved snakes vomiting fire on your tomb walls. But don't let the charm fool you. Life in Deir el-Medina isn't always idyllic. The workers go on strike, yes. Ramses, the world's first recorded labor strike, happens on your watch. After a delay in grain payments, the artisans lay down their tools and march to the mortuary. Temple chanting demands: no food, no tombs. Even gods need builders with full bellies. To your credit, the protest doesn't end in blood. Officials calm the workers, grain is distributed, and work resumes. But the message is clear: even divine kings must pay their workers. Some historians still argue whether this marks the beginning of a more modern Egypt where bureaucracy meets civil unrest. Others say it's just another example of how even perfection needs a lunch break. You, meanwhile, take it in stride. You increase rations. You authorize extra beer. You quietly remove an overseer whose record was, let's say, a bit too enthusiastic with the lash dot, because you know something most kings never understand. Legacy is a team sport. Without these workers, your tomb is just a cave. Your temples are just rocks. Your gods are just names. So you let them keep working. You let them keep dreaming, and dream they do. Some workers begin to leave messages meant for you, prayers, etched near depictions of your divine image. They ask for protection, for luck, for forgiveness. Some even ask to be judged by you in the afterlife instead of Oza. It's subtle, it's wild, it's worship, Ramses. You are no longer just a patron of builders. To them, you are the builder, and that might just outlast even stone. There's a dry wind stirring in the east. At first, it's just a rumor talk of illness and strange signs. You hear whispers from the caravan routes, bodies burning in unfamiliar ways. traders hesitant to share food, priests performing purification, rituals with more urgency than usual. Then the Nile floods lower than expected, then a little lower the next year. And then worryingly there's talk of children falling ill, of livestock dying too soon, of cities burning incense, not in celebration, but to cover the smell of sickness. The people begin to murmur, and somewhere, in the background, like the chorus of a slow-building song, a name re-emerges. Moses, let's talk about it. There's no mention of him in your temple records. No tablets carved with a baby in a reed basket or a man parting the sea. Officially, Egypt doesn't lose slaves to miraculous uprisings. There's no frog infestation, no river of blood, but oral tales are harder to erase than stone and they spread. Here's where it gets interesting. The timeline kind of lines up. Not exactly, but close enough that for centuries people will ask, was Ramses the pharaoh of the Exodus? Historians still argue. Oh, do they argue? Some say yes, his long reign, his many building projects, the cities of Pyrameses and Pithom, that match the biblical names. Others say no, the dates don't fully match, and the biblical account, written centuries later, may be more metaphor than memory, but the curious pieces keep piling up. A late inscription from your reign refers to foreigners fleeing labor. Camps, nothing dramatic, just one line, but it's there. There's a clay fragment from a border garrison in Canaan reporting missing workers, presumed gone east. Again subtle, but against it. There and then there's the Ipua, papyrus, a document that, while written centuries earlier, describes strange disasters, rivers turning red, servants rebelling, the land in chaos. Not proof, exactly, but it feels familiar. Meanwhile, your priests are working overtime. They invoke the gods in longer ceremonies. They burn more offerings. They recite incantations meant to ward off plague winds. There's a new spell recorded in Karnak that claims to close the breathways of disease with the light of Ra. You don't panic. You commission a new relief at your temple, showing you smiting chaos, itself depicted not as a foreign army, but as a cloud of darkness with eyes and claws. It's subtle messaging. Don't worry, Egypt. I've got this. Still, there's no denying it. Something feels off. The sky has that wrong kind of quiet. Farmers mutter about drought. Mothers tie extra charms to their children's wrists. Even your own physicians suggest you begin drinking more lotus root tea and sleeping with a hematite amulet under your pillow, just in case it's not just illness. It's something spiritual. Aheavines. And yet, you double down on your divinity. You commission new temples. You increase festivals. You personally preside over the Opet festival in Thebes, riding in a bark of gold as thousands cheer. The gods haven't abandoned Egypt, you proclaim. You're still here. You're still Pharaoh, but in the quiet moments when the torches gutter low, when the air tastes strange, when the priests fumble their words, you start to wonder, what if this isn't a disease? What if this is a message? You're not alone. In this thinking, some high priests start reinterpreting omens. A cracked hippo tusk found in a shrine is suddenly a sign of divine warning. An ibis flies north at the wrong time of year, obviously a bad omen. A royal astrologer even proposes that the stars over Pyrameses have begun to shift alignment, no longer favoring the gods, but pointing east toward Canaan. One night, a dream haunts you, the statues in Abu Simbel weeping, their carved eyes dripping blood that stains the sand. You wake breathless, sweating, reaching for the dagger beside your bed. You don't speak of it. Instead, you order more statues built, because that's your answer to everything built taller, louder, forever. But even stone can't silence. Rumor. You hear tales of a manor former palace child, some say now leading people across the wilderness. They call him a prophet, a rebel, a madman. You're not sure which. You only know that more people have vanished from your records in the past 5 years than in the 20 before. And one tablet, stored far from court, bears a curious note: let him go, that they may serve their God. It's unsigned. You never read it aloud. You're Ramses. You don't acknowledge defeat. You don't kneel to invisible gods. You are a god. But sometimes, just sometimes, you listen for footsteps in the desert. The desert stretches wide and silent, but your answer is always the same: build. If disease or rebellion or superstition wants to test you, then you'll leave behind something even death can't touch. So now, Ramses, it's time for your greatest feat of engineering, devotion, and divine one-upmanship. Abu Simbel, let's be clear. This isn't just a temple. This is a declaration, a thunderclap in stone, a message to gods and mortals alike that Ramses the Great is not going quietly into the afterlife. It starts with a cliff-just stone, sand and sunlight, and from this blank face of the Nubian frontier, you demand something impossible: a full temple, carved not built, inside the mountain. The sheer logistics would make most kings turn to gold-trimmed wine cups and mutter something about legacy being overrated. Not. You dot your architects map the solar calendar to the walls. They calculate star angles, plan reliefs, and sketch proportions so precise they feel more sacred geometry than architecture. You personally approve the layout for colossal statues of yourself, each standing nearly 70 feet tall, seated in eternal judgment, to flank the temple's doorway, to face east staring down the dawn as if daring the sun not to rise. And just beyond those, a smaller temple for Neth Afertia. Yes, even in stone, even after years without her, she's by your side. Equal height, equal throne. She, too, is a deity here worshipped as Hathor reborn. But back to the main event. The interior of Abu Simbel is a shadowy sanctum. You step through the colossal doorway and descend into a world where light fades and divinity sharpens. Massive pillars carved into the likeness of Osiris hold up the chamber. On every wall, stories: your triumph at Kadesh again, your offerings to Ra, your communion with Ptah, Amen, and yourself. Yes, yourself. One relief shows Ramses being crowned by 2 gods. Another, Ramses leading gods into battle. Historians still argue whether this was humility in reverse, or just your own unique theology. Either way, it's very on brand. But here's the miracle. Twice a year, on February 22nd and October 22nd, the rising sun shoots through the temple's entrance and travels 200 feet inward, piercing darkness until it strikes the central sanctuary. 3 statues, Rahorakti, Amun-Ra, and you, illuminated in golden light. The 4th, Ptah, god of the underworld, remains in shadow, perfectly planned, perfectly divine. Or was it a cosmic accident? Modern engineers debate this. Some argue your architects must have used sightlines, plumb bobs, and shadow tracking over years. Others say the mountain slopes simply worked out in your favor. But deep down, you know the truth. It worked because you willed it. Visitors come from all over the empire to witness the phenomenon. They sleep outside for days. They bring offerings. Some weep when the light hits the stone. One scribe faints, and you stand at the temple's entrance in full regalia, arms raised like a conductor guiding Ra's spotlight. Even the gods, it seems, know when to follow your cues. But Abu Simbel isn't just about worship. It's political, too. This is Nubia. Remember the southern frontier. Carving your face into their cliffs sends a clear message. This land is Ramses's land, and the sun itself agrees. Every merchant, priest, or warlord who approaches from the south must pass under your stony gaze. You've turned the desert into a monument, the border into a billboard. And then there's the quirky detail. Archaeologists still marvel over hidden graffiti. Deep within one chamber left by a Greek visitor centuries after your death, it reads, "I stood here in awe of the pharaoh." Proof that even long after your bones dried, your temples still struck awe in foreign hearts. But you're not finished. You order more projects. Temples at Dare, shrines along the Nile. You even begin plans for your tomb, chamber deeper and longer than any that came before. But that's a tale for another night. Right now, you stand before Abu Simbel, the wind brushing your cloak, the sky burning blue. A priest beside you whispers, "You have conquered time." You don't answer. You simply nudge just once and turn back toward Ramses, where your next project awaits. Because, in your mind, Ramses, the only true death, is being forgotten. There are many titles etched before your name: conqueror, builder, living god, but behind palace walls and closed curtain chambers. There's one role you can't escape: father. Lots of kings have children. You have dynasties within dynasties. Sons, daughters, heirs, half-heirs, aspirants, so many that even your scribes eventually throw up their styluses and start writing things like "yet another son of His Majesty." At last count, over 100 children. Your palace in Ramses becomes a royal maze of youth and ambition. Tiny sandals slap across polished floors. Tutors herd flocks of princelings like anxious shepherds. Musicians play lullabies to infants who will one day command armies, but don't mistake the laughter for leisure. You run the royal household like a boot camp. Your eldest sons train in military arts from the time they can walk. They learn to ride chariots, string bows, read scrolls, and speak in both Egyptian and diplomatic Hittite. At 13, they lead parades. At 15, some command battalions. By 18, they've either earned your nod or your sideways glance. Take Amenhotep, your first crown prince. His name means Amen is with his strong arm, and he lives up to it. A natural warrior, sharp-eyed, loyal, you send him to battle and receive glowing reports. You inscribe his name in your temples alongside your own. But the gods play strange games. He dies young. You're silent when they bring you the news. No wails, no torn linen. Just the slow, bitter look of a man who's lost something he carved from his own soul. Then come the others: Ramses II, Hakimorset, Menapta, a parade of potential heirs. You assign them each roles. One oversees temples, another governs Memphis. A third manages foreign correspondence. You pit them against one another, gently at first. Let them sharpen each other like paired blades. And through it all, you watch. In quieter corners, your daughters also wield influence. Some marry foreign kings, others serve as priestesses. One daughter, Bentanta, is rumored to advise generals. From behind a curtain, Another Meritaman is called she who fills the palace with beauty and appears in your temple relief store, poised, almost divine. Still, it's not all sacred rites and political matchings. The palace is also chaotic. Children squabble, wives jostle for attention, courtiers align themselves with whoever seems to be next, and at the center of this gilded whirlwind, you, arms crossed, hearing 3 petitions before breakfast, and settling disputes over royal toys by noon. There's a peculiar joy in it all. One afternoon, a grandson Ramses III, the 5th, even you lose track, sometimes runs to you, dragging a carved hippo behind him on a string. "Grandfather, I made him roar," he says. You lift the toy. It's painted with bright ochre and blue stripes. Very incorrect. Very adorable. You laugh just once, quietly, then return to your scrolls. But behind the laughter lurks reality. You're getting older, and while you still stand straight, still climb the temple stairs, there are days when the sandals feel heavier, when the royal bed feels more like a stone block, when you stare across the columns of pyramids and wonder, which one of these children will wear the crowns after me? Succession isn't just blood, it's theater. The people must believe. The priests must nod. The army must salute. You test each son with trials. You watch how they walk, how they speak to lesser officials, how they handle being denied what they want. And slowly you shape your successor, Nemnuk. Not the flashiest, not the most charming, but solid, reliable, iron-willed. He watches you the way you once watched, Seti, absorbing, learning, waiting. You name him crown prince late in your reign. Some courtiers gasp, others sigh in relief. A few disappear mysteriously and are never spoken of again. That's how it goes. Meanwhile, you keep marrying, even as your hair grays or turns a suspiciously uniform shade of ochre. Depending on who's mixing your pigments, you welcome new brides into the harem, political, ceremonial, or simply companionate. There's a fringe account from a late period, scroll suggesting you once forgot the name of one wife mid-ceremony and simply referred to her as beloved of Ra. She apparently found this flattering, but through it all, through the laughter, the chaos, the arguments over inheritance, and the endless paintings of your face, you remain one thing above all, father of Egypt. And as the palace settles, each night as the fires burn low and your sons whisper in corners and your daughters light their lamps, you sit in your chamber and look toward the western horizon, not at the sun, but beyond it, toward the next world, where you wonder, will they still call me father there, too? The Nile has always been loyal. Every year, it rises swelling with silt-rich waters from the distant highlands, blessing the fields, filling the canals, setting the rhythm for life itself. It is the bloodstream of Egypt, your bloodstream, Ramses. But now, something is off. The floods come late, or come small, or worse, don't come at all. The priests blame the stars. The farmers blame the priests. The court, of course, blames you, though they'd never say it aloud. Not to your face, not to a living God who can still shoot a bow and ride a chariot, even if they now discreetly pad your saddle. The people murmur. At first it's just in the corners of marketplaces, under the awnings of reed stalls, the price of barley creeping up, a flock of sick goats, a suspicious pattern in the flies. Then the rumors bloom like black lotus. The Nile is angry. The gods are distant. The pharaoh has lost favor. And that hits deep. because you've spent a lifetime telling them otherwise. You've carved your image beside Ra. You've summoned gods with incense and gold, and entire festivals choreographed to your heartbeat. You built temples in their names, then built yourself into those temples. But now the temples echo, offerings thin. Some shrines are quiet. Crops rot in the fields as priests mutter more urgently, their incense thick and fast burning, like they're trying to catch a god's attention before it's too late. And you do what Ramses the Great always does. You act. You summon grain from storehouses in Pyramises. You cancel taxes for 3 districts. You host a public ceremony at Karnak, where you, barefoot and draped in white linen, pour milk and wine into the Nile, praying aloud for mercy. The crowd watches, silent. You, praying. It's not weakness, it's theater. It's a message. The pharaoh is still close to the gods, still the intercessor, still the one who bends nature with a word. But behind the scenes, you're furious at the Nile, at the gods. At time, you've done everything right. You built, you ruled, you sacrificed, you endured loss, you turned enemies into allies. And now, as your joints ache and your breath shortens, the lifeblood of Egypt betrays you. Not today. You order the canals dredged, widened, redirected. You call upon scribes and engineers to reinvent old water-lifting devices, shadoofs, and Archimedes screws, though that last one won't really show up for a few centuries, let's be honest. You commission new nilometers to track the rise and fall of the river with obsessive precision. You even offer rewards, gold rings, honorary titles, extra beer rations to anyone who brings new irrigation plans that can outwit the drought. Meanwhile, a new kind of ritual gains popularity among commoners, one that doesn't ask the gods to bless the land, but to forgive it. The land has sinned, they say. We must cleanse it. Priests don't approve, but they adapt. That's Egypt, always adapting. There's also a rising class of traveling preachers, wandering holy men in rough linen who recite hybrid prayers, not blasphemous, exactly, just unofficial. One reportedly claims the God behind the God will punish false kings. That one gets politely relocated to a quieter district. And then there's the most curious phenomenon of all. A group of children begins burying clay pots filled with little figurines offerings to the spirit of the Nile itself. No temples, no priests, just child-sized hope, hidden in riverbanks. Fringe historians, centuries later, will call this the earliest sign of folk religious reform in Lower Egypt. You'll call it a warning. You turn to the stars. Your court astrologers, wrapped in silk linen, read the heavens. They say the gods are in a cycle of testing, that the constellation of the crocodile has eaten too many stars, that Ra's bark is in shadow. You clench your jaw. You commission a grand relief showing the Nile kneeling before you, literal kneeling, arms outstretched as if begging forgiveness. It's excessive. It's a little bit mad. You approve it without hesitation because fear feeds memory and legacy. Ramses' legacy is everything. When the harvest finally comes small, but better than nothing, you declare a national celebration. You parade through Thebes, wearing a crown of river reeds. You declare the Nile healed, the gods satisfied, Egypt reborn. You don't quite believe it, but they do, and that pharaoh is enough. You fought wars, fathered nations, carved stones so deeply into time that even the gods might trip over your legacy. But there's one battlefield you now dominate with unmatched skill, perception, History won't remember you by accident, Ramses. You're going to make it, remember. The propaganda machine isn't a side project. It's a pillar of your rule, and its gears churn with scribes, sculptors, priests, poets, and painters all tuned to one mission. Transform your life into legend. Let's start with the walls. Every temple, shrine, and pylon bears your name, often more than once. In fact, modern Egyptologists have a running joke that if you trip over a rock in Egypt, there's a 50/50th chance it says built by Ramses the Great on the bottom. Karnak, Ramses.Luxor. Ramses, a half-collapsed mud brick granary out by the donkey trails. Yep, Ramses, and you're not subtle about it. You often overwrite earlier kings' names and replace them with your own. Even your father Seti's monuments sometimes. Get the update. Historians still argue whether this was calculated symbolism or just a little competitive flourish. Thanks for the foundation, Dad. I'll take it from here. But walls alone aren't enough. So you diversify reliefs, inscriptions, stele, from the cataracts of Nubia to the cliffs near Byblos. Your stories bloom in chisels and pigments, Kadesh. You're there charging alone into 2,500 chariots, Nubia. You're there seated like a storm cloud of justice. Temple entrances. You're always just a bit taller than the gods. Even Ra occasionally seems to lean toward you for guidance. And let's not forget the poems. The poems. Court poets compose works so dramatic they would make modern screenwriters blush. One popular example, the poem of Pentateuns, your Kadesh, heroics into an epic so grand that schoolchildren, centuries later, still recite it in formal voice. It claims that the gods abandoned Egypt, but you stood alone, shouting, "I am Ramses. Alone I shall fight," before raining arrows like divine thunder now. Whether this actually happened, or your scribes were just having a particularly creative afternoon, no one knows. But no one dares question it at the time, either. Your artists paint you in composite. Poses standing sideways with your face turned out, muscles taut, beard perfect, eyes eternal, always the same, always flawless, always young. You've branded yourself better than most modern politicians. You're the OG influencer of ancient civilization. Even your statues speak for you at Luxor Temple. There's a famous scene where you're shown offering Mate, concept of divine balance to the gods. Except, the gods are looking at you. Instead of the offering, that's some subtle flex. And then there's the crown jewel of your PR campaign. The said festival reliefs, held after 30 years of rule. The said festival is a ceremonial renewal of kingship. Most pharaohs don't make it to one. You hold multiple. You run laps around the temple courtyard in full regalia, surrounded by dancers, musicians, and an audience practically foaming with devotion. You're reenacting divine rebirth, proving that yes, even after decades on the throne, you're still fit, favored, and functionally immortal. And you have it all carved into stone. For the record, for the people, for the future. Meanwhile, foreign emissaries tremble when they enter your audience halls. Not just because of the guards, though they help, but because every inch of space screams dominance. The walls tell your victories. The columns whisper your lineage. The throne itself is flanked by lions, with inscriptions declaring, "He who sits here speaks the voice of Ra." And then, in a move that surprises even your advisors, you have copies of the Treaty of Kadesh inscribed, publicly in both Egyptian and Akkadian, the language of diplomacy. That's right, You don't just keep the peace, you market it. Even your enemies are included in the story, but only in roles where you come out on top, and you're not above a bit of revisionist magic. There's one temple scene where you're depicted as a child, cradled in the arms of a god, already wearing the double crown, born divine, destined to rule. Never mind that you were probably a bit clumsy as a toddler and once sneezed on a priest, it's fine. The statues won't tell the fringe detail. There's evidence that a new scribe school curriculum was introduced under your reign, one that taught reading and writing through poems and texts about you. That's right, Egyptian kids practice their hieroglyphs by copying stories of your battles, your prayers, and your perfectly symmetrical jawline. You're not just shaping history, you're shaping how it's remembered, and in doing so, you've built something greater than statues, greater than temples, greater even than pyramids. You've built a reality where Ramses is eternal, not because of what happened, but because of what was written. The sun still rises, but it doesn't rise quite as fast as it used to. Your walk through the palace slows. You linger longer over maps, scrolls, and moments of silence. You listen more, though no one dares suggest it. Even the priests know. Gods do not age, they merely deepen. But Ramses, in the stillness of your private chambers, you know the truth. You are getting old, not ancient yet, not mummified old, but old enough to feel it in your knees, in your breath after long processions, in the way your younger sons no longer bow, they hover, ready to catch you if you stumble, which you don't, yet you single quotes. VE reigned longer than anyone imagined possible, longer than some dynasties. Egypt has reshaped itself around you like the Nile around an island. You are the central current, and that means something strange is beginning to happen. People are starting to prepare for your death. While you're still very much alive, the transition begins subtly. More prayers to Osiris show up in public temples. The high priest of Ammon begins grooming a new generation of ritual leaders, and your advisors, ever the loyal sycophants, start sentences with phrases like, "When your majesty one day joins the West, it's annoying, you're still here, still commanding, still sharp, still building, but you're also realistic. Your own father, Seti I, died in his 40s. Most pharaohs don't get to 50. You're pushing 80. The throne creaks a little more when you sit. The lotus wine tastes a little sweeter when mixed with powdered ginger to ease your stomach. So you start preparing, not for death exactly, for succession. You've been through 3 crown princes, already each lost to disease, misfortune, or the strange mathematics of fate. Now, your next in line is Meneptah, your 13th son, give or take a few lost scribal records. He's no boy. He's in his 60s. His hair is silver. His hands are steady. You call him in. You sit across from him, not on a throne, but a low stool beside a fountain. The trickling water makes it feel gentler, less royal, more human. You speak to him not as Ramses the Great, but as a father, as a man who has known the weight of crowns and the loneliness of kingship. Egypt must not flinch. You say. Meneptah nods. He understands. You've trained him too well not to. Still, you test him secretly, of course. You send him to mediate a temple dispute in Karnak. You place him in charge of grain distributions in drought-stricken districts. You watch, from behind the curtains, how he handles the whispers of the court, and you're pleased, not thrilled, not blown away, but reassured. He won't be you, but that's the point. He'll be him. Meanwhile, the court adjusts. Ministers form quiet alliances. Royal scribes make backup copies of wills. Even the artisans of Deir el-Medina start sketching post-Ramses symbols in their margin scenes of transition, of mourning, of crowns being passed like torches. One sculptor, bold beyond belief, even carves a statue of you with grey in your beard. You order it placed in the inner court, not the public one, because, well, branding. Yet despite the subtle shifting of the sands, you remain active. You still preside over religious festivals. You still inspect your tomb's progress in the Valley of the Kings. You still oversee letters from Byblus, Cyprus, even Nubia, where they still refer to you as the eternal flame. But something else happens. A softening. You begin to visit old places. You return to Thebes and stand before your father's temple, your hand resting on the stone he once touched. You walk through Nefertari's tomb again, lingering longer at the painted doorway where she enters the afterlife, still glowing, still smiling. You ride to Abu Simbel slowly, deliberately, and watch the morning sun strike your statue just right. For once, you don't perform, you don't posture, you just sit and let the light warm your face. You even meet with commoners, farmers, scribes, fishermen. You listen to their stories, their worries, their dreams. One old man, eyes cloudy, thanks you for keeping the Nile flowing all these years. You don't correct him. Let him believe it, because in a way, it's true. You are Egypt now, its God, its father, its shadow, but your shadow is stretching longer. One night, you dream of Osiris. He stands at the edge of the Black River, arms outstretched. He says nothing, just watches you, as though waiting for you to cross. But you don't, not yet. Not yet. You wake and summon your scribe. You dictate a new decree, simple, clear, final. My son shall wear both crowns. My car shall watch. And for the first time in many years, you sleep soundly. In the stillness of the Valley of the Kings, your tomb grows deeper. Pickaxes ring like faint thunder through limestone. Lamps flicker in the dark, casting gold shadows on the chiseled walls. Workers sing quietly to ward off bad luck. The tomb isn't just a resting place, it's a final act, a sacred blueprint of your rebirth. And, if we're being honest, your last chance to outdo every pharaoh who came before you. You've approved the design personally. Key V7, nestled just across from your father Seti's more famous tomb, poetic, a little, strategic, very, the two of you, rulers of empire, builders of gods, facing each other for eternity, mirror and legacy. The tomb is long, very long, almost 150 meters, winding through bedrock like a pharaonic spine. At the end, a vast burial chamber with a red quartzite sarcophagus, so heavy it took 2 months just to lower into place. But the real magic is in the walls. They're not blank, they breathe. Scenes from the Book of the Dead, the Book of Gates, and wet, each spell, each god, each cryptic symbol drawn in vivid pigments, cobalt blue, sunset orange, jet black core guiding you through the treacherous hours of the underworld. You don't just want to survive the afterlife, you want to conquer it. You're shown riding solar barges, flanked by jackal-headed guardians. You smite serpents of chaos. You pass through the 12 gates of night. And at the end of it all, you stand reborn, radiant, among the stars. There's a scene where your soul, your Ba, sails through celestial waters beside Ra. The sun god, the eternal fire, acknowledges you, equal, brother. Historians still argue whether these images reflect deep personal faith or just really strong marketing. You don't care. You know what awaits. Meanwhile, on the surface, death becomes a daily guest. You begin to attend more funerals, not just of high priests and court officials, but of your own sons, daughters, grandchildren. You outlive most of them. By the time you reach your 9th decade, you've seen entire branches of your family tree wither before your eyes. And yet you endure. Some call you blessed, others cursed. You watch from your throne as Meneptah ages beside you, no longer just heir, but your mirror, his hair thinning, his voice carrying your weight. Sometimes the two of you sit in silence. No need for words. He already knows what the throne demands. Still, you continue the work. You instruct your artisans to include tiny secret chambers in your 2 magical trapdoors, as you call them. These might contain additional scrolls, amulets, or perhaps just red herrings for future grave robbers. A fringe theory floated, millennia later, suggests your tomb once had a decoy burial shaft, meant to fool even the gods of chaos. If true, it worked. You remain elusive even in death. But death does knock, eventually, and you begin to prepare your mummy. Not personally. Of course you'll leave that to the embalmers, but you oversee the process. You select the oils, the resins, the linens. Your body is to be preserved perfectly, no swelling, no shrinkage, no awkward expressions frozen in eternal surprise. They will drain your fluids, pack your chest cavity, paint your skin in sacred ochre to mirror the tone of Osiris. They will wrap you in hundreds of layers, each one blessed by high priests whispering spells into the folds. Your burial masco, the mask is never found, but scholars imagine it, golden, symmetrical, inlaid with lapis lazuli and turquoise, eyebrows curved like wings of a falcon. Your likeness perfected, beyond time, beyond decay. And then comes the funeral. It is the most elaborate ceremony Egypt has seen. Boats line the river like a floating army. Priests chant day and night. 100 servants carry your legacy in their hands. Miniature temples, scrolls, offerings. Your canopic jars, those sacred vessels holding your liver, lungs, stomach, and intestines, are sealed in alabaster and laid beside you. The people line the riverbanks in silence. Some wail, some bow, some simply watch. They know what's happening. A god is going to sleep. As your sarcophagus slides into the burial chamber, torches flicker. Dust falls from the ceiling. The last priest speaks your name not as king, but as soul. May he pass through the western horizon and awaken as light. The tomb is sealed. The valley falls quiet, and Egypt ... holds its breath. Time moves differently in tombs. It doesn't march, it settles. Like dust, like silence, like memory. Your name, once shouted in temples and echoed through canyons, now rests behind sealed doors deep within the earth. But outside, Egypt doesn't stop for mourning. You're gone, Ramses. But your legend isn't. Meneptah ascends, your 13th son, the one who waited longer than most people live. He takes the throne with trembling hands and steel in his spine. His rule is quieter, less gilded, but solid. He honors you, of course, keeps your temples funded, invokes your name in oaths, but he knows better than to try matching your shadow. No one could dot in Egypt. It rolls forward, slowly, carefully, but something is shifting. Your empire was built on you, your force, your image, your constant presence. With you gone, the weight begins to tilt. The priests of Ammon grow louder. The treasury tightens. Foreign envoys grow bolder. The balance you kept with stone and spectacle begins to wobble. Still, your monuments remain. They speak for you. Abu Simbel still glows with sunlight twice a year. The pillars at Karnak still carry your names, your deeds, your many, many faces. Even as winds erode the paint and earthquakes rumble through the valley, your story holds. But here's where things get strange. Centuries pass, dynasties rise and fall. Temples are buried. Ramses is eventually abandoned, its bricks scavenged for other projects. The Nile changes course. Cities forget your name. Even your tomb is lost, covered by rock slides and sand, its entrance sealed by time and perhaps ... design ... and then. Even your mummy disappears. The priests, panicked during the chaos of later reigns, secretly move your body not once, not twice, but possibly 3 times to protect it from tomb robbers. Eventually, it's hidden among a royal cache in Deir el-Bahari, jumbled together with dozens of other kings. Unlabeled, unmarked, the great Ramses the Great stored like luggage. For over 3,000 years, you wait, and then you're found. In 1881 CE, a local family selling ancient artifacts draws the attention of Egyptian authorities. An excavation is launched, deep within a tomb shaft known as TT 320, among the broken sarcophagi and dusty wrappings. Your mummy is uncovered, draped in linen, arms crossed, face frozen in something between pride and exhaustion. You are identified, not by gold, but by a faded label on the bandages. Ramses II, moved for protection. When researchers unroll your linen, they gasp. Your teeth are worn, your nose bent, your hair still red . Yes, red. Historians lose their minds. Some wonder if you were a natural redhead. Others suggest henna. Fringe theorists claim you were of foreign origin, possibly Libyan or Hittite. But whatever the cause, one thing becomes clear: even in death, you're complicating the narrative. In 1976, your body is flown to Paris for examination and conservation. France issues a passport for you, occupation listed as king deceased. You receive a full military reception upon arrival. Soldiers salute, reporters snap photos. A pharaoh returns, not to his palace, but to the lab. Your remains are studied like a treasure map. X-rays, dental scans, bone samples, and what they find. You lived a long, painful life. Arthritis twisted your spine. Old injuries pitted your bones. You walked with a stoop near the end. But you endured. And now you rest again. In the National Museum of Egyptian Civilization in Cairo. Not behind sealed walls, but under glass, climate-controlled, softly lit. Visited by thousands, they whisper your name. Children press their faces to the display. Tourists from every corner of the world lean close to glimpse the king who ruled longer than most empires. They don't see pain, they see power. They don't see a corpse, they see a story. And whether or not the real Ramses, the boy who rode beside Seti, the man who buried Nefertari, the god who built cities, whether you would approve of this legacy, doesn't matter. You got what you wanted. You are remembered. You once stood at the center of the world, a golden crook in one hand, a flail in the other, the Nile flowing behind you like a royal train . Now, Ramses, you're standing at the edge of memory . And still. You stand, your reign lasted years longer than most Egyptians lived, longer than any pharaoh before or after. When you first wore the crown, some of your subjects were still swaddled infants. By the time you took your final breath, their grandchildren were raising their own children beneath statues of you. You were not a ruler, you were an era, Egypt. It self-adjusted around you like a living monument. Entire generations grew up knowing, only Ramses. You were the sun in the sky, the voice in court, the names sung at dawn festivals and etched onto every jar, tablet, temple, and tomb. For 66 years, the idea of change felt absurd, but then slowly, as you faded into your final season, change crept in like the first chill of desert night. Meneptah took the reins, old, experienced, patient. His reign would last only a decade. 10 years, nothing compared to yours. But Egypt needed someone steady to land the ship you'd sailed so far. After him came others, kings with names less carved, less sung. The 20th dynasty rose, then the 21st, one pharaoh after another, triangle ways, trying to recapture your flame. Some declared themselves new Ramesside kings. They took your name, your symbols, your titles, but not your legacy. Because you were singular, later rulers could build temples, but not ones like Abu Simbel. They could wage war but not write their battles. Across stone like operas, they could marry well but not love like you. Loved Nefertari, whose tomb still sings your name under layers of earth and color, and yet their efforts imitation, homage, even outright theft proved your enduring shadow. You defined kingship. For centuries, Ramses became not just a name but a template. Even foreign empires couldn't ignore you. The Assyrians, when they sacked Thebes, reportedly paused at your temple's orb, uncertain whether to loot or kneel. The Persians admired your tactics. The Greeks spoke of Ozymandias, king of kings, whose shattered colossus stared from the sand with arrogant majesty. Even the great Herodotus, traveling Egypt long after your bones had dried, asked about the mighty pharaoh, whose deeds seemed to defy time. Though they guessed at your name, the stories persisted. Your shadow stretched across centuries. But let's be honest, it wasn't always flattering. By the time of Roman rule, your legacy was scrambled. Some saw you as tyrant, others as god. Many couldn't separate you from myth. One account even claimed you ruled with a magical ring that let you control the Nile. Not true, just great press. Then came the poet Shelley, in 1818, pens a sonnet about a ruined statue in the desert, its legs standing, its face buried in sand. You know the line, look on my works, the mighty and despair. It sounds tragic, but what the poet missed is this: you are still there, the works are still standing, and the despair that belongs not to you but to those who thought memory could die. Because even now, tourists walk beneath your temples and crane their necks to see your face carved 100 feet above. Children in schools repeat your name. Scholars debate your politics, your battles, your marriages, your mummy, and not just in Egypt, in Europe, in Asia, in documentaries and museums, and even social media snapshots of your statues glowing beneath. Desert stars, you are still famous. And here's the wildest part. You might have outlived even the gods you worshipped. Ra, Amun, Ptah, Osiris. They faded from daily prayer centuries ago. But you're on t-shirts, in textbooks. You've got your own documentaries. You've been reconstructed in 3D. You're not divine anymore. You're something rarer. You're legendary, And as the world spins forward through revolutions, religions, satellites, and streaming services, you remain in stone, in story, in memory. The world grows louder, Ramses, but you remain still. You no longer wear linen, no longer dine in rose-scented halls, or give speeches from golden balconies. But that doesn't mean you've disappeared. Far from it. You're just listening now, from your place beneath museum glass or behind the sandstone faces of statues. You hear everything, the tour guides calling you the most powerful pharaoh of them all. The children whispering, he's the one who ruled forever, right? The archaeologists kneeling beside crumbled bricks, brushing away sand like it's holy dust. They come to see you, to stand before what's left of you. And every time someone squints up at Abu Simbel or runs their fingers across your cartouche, it's like the past breathes in again. They say you ruled for 66 years, but no one ever says when you stopped. You're still on their tongues, still in their dreams. Even the stars haven't forgotten. Every February and October, they still align with Abu Simbel's sanctuary, striking your stone face with golden fire as they did in life. You designed that moment not just for your lifetime, but for all time. And it worked. Even scientists, pragmatic and skeptical, find themselves pausing when that sunlight hits your carved cheeks. They call it alignment. You call it showtime. Your afterlife wasn't a gamble. It was a blueprint. And in the end, you succeeded at something every pharaoh before you and after you hoped for. You refused to vanish. In the world beyond the living, you stride on. Through the 12 gates of the Dawat, past serpents, through fire lakes, under vaulted stars. You wear the crown not of Upper or Lower Egypt, but of legacy itself. The gods nod as you pass. Even Osiris makes room, and in the world of the living, your name still rides on wind through temples, still floats down the Nile in the quiet hours of dusk. It flickers in hieroglyphs and stone carvings, in textbook margins and bedtime stories, because this is what you built, not just an empire, but memory. Your statues may crack, your temples may crumble, but as long as humans remember the past, they'll remember you. So now, listener, you can breathe again. The torches have dimmed. The chariots have stopped thundering. The shouts of scribes and builders, the clang of copper, the hiss of incense, they all fade now. We've walked beside a king who never stopped building, never stopped believing. A man who made gods his companions and time his canvas. He wasn't perfect, he wasn't gentle, but he was enduring. And maybe that's the lesson, that greatness isn't just about power. It's about presence. It's about what remains when the noise is gone. What echoes? Ramses left those echoes for us, in stone, in story, in the eyes of every statue that watches the sun rise over sand. Let that stay with you a little while longer. Let the quiet hum of the Nile drift through your thoughts. Let the flicker of desert firelight warm the edges of your sleep, and know this: the pharaoh has passed on, but he still watches, still listens, still waits for the next dreamer bold, enough to write their name in eternity. So let the shadows stretch, let your breath slow, and if your eyes feel heavy now, good. That means you've made the journey. Now sleep. Sleep like a king who has nothing left to prove. Sleep like a stone temple under stars. Sleep like the desert, deep and wide. Good night.